Yo, what's going on, gamers, coders, speedrunners, and all-around game enthusiasts? This is Joystick Justin here, and welcome to Devlog 4 for Project Adapt. There's been a lot added in this update, so I'm going to try to go through it a lot faster than some of my other devlogs. We're going to start with the first change. Press F11 and you go full screen. It takes my recording software just a second to notice that we're full screen, but there you go. So now you don't see any borders around anything, stuff like that. So we're in full screen now. So I have a few test worlds because I've been testing certain things. One of the things I'm going to show you when we get into the code is that I've recoded the system for identifying tiles. And so like if you break a boulder, for example, I've recoded the way it detects that you have broken a boulder. And then I've also recoded how it knows what items it drops when you break a boulder or a tree or anything like that. So basically any tile that you break, I've recoded the way that it knows the items to give you. And I've done the same thing for placing items. So each item, the ID for each item in your inventory has information about what it places. If you try to right click it, if you try to move it down and right click it. So we can use a wire for an example. I've recoded the system that detects, okay, this item places this tile. Because there are more items than tiles, right? There's like all these items that don't get used, and you're seeing a little pig running around over here. There's also pigs added to the game. I guess I have to show that now. So yeah, I fully just like added a pig to the game with a nice little walking animation. Now his walking animation is different. So for the character, there's all these different like images for each basically picture during his walk animation. The pig, all it is his legs rotate on their spot. And so you can kill the pig. I can click the pig and it has 20 hit points. So I'm selecting nothing right now. If I change to an axe, it does more damage. If I change to a pickaxe, it also does more damage and it takes some durability. And then it gives me 2 pieces of meat for killing the pig. So there you go. So the pig's been added to the game. And so I had to recode collision for the pig to work because the collision was hard-coded basically to work for the character and nothing else. But, you know, the pig needs to be able to bump into this wall and not move. So you just saw, if you rewind the video, you'll be able to see that the pig hit this wall and was trying to walk, and his walk animation was happening, but he wasn't going anywhere. It's kind of like doing what my character's doing right now. He's trying to walk into the wall, but there's a wall in the way, so he doesn't move. The pig was doing the same thing. And I also put a little knockback animation. You saw when I hit the pig, it would like get flung back a little bit. So another thing that I've changed about the game is I actually found a bug where if you're trying to, if I deleted this test file, if this world had processors placed in the game, so that's like blast furnaces, refiners, any electrical things, if I deleted this file, what it does is it changes this file's name. So this, in the actual, like if you open up the files for the game, this is file 1, and then all the data that's in that file is inside the file 1 folder, and this one's file 2. So what would happen is if you deleted this file, it would change this file's name and every file below it to be one less. So basically, if I delete this is file 1 gone, so file 2 gets renamed to file 1. But the issue is each processor, so this is blast furnace, all these electrical machines, they all store their file name as one of the things in their storage, basically, their data. It stores the file name. And so part of that file name was file1 / electric furnace / all that stuff. So it had the whole name in it. But if you deleted a file, then if it was file 2, for example, if you deleted file 1, then that file 2 gets renamed to file 1, which means that the furnace or whatever, it would still store that it's found at file 2, which no longer exists, and it's been renamed. If that didn't make sense to you, then it doesn't really matter that much that it doesn't make sense to you. But basically, I fixed that issue. Now you can delete files, and all the processors still know where they are found in the files. So another thing we've added here is that acorns can now be placed in the world. And they grow into trees. So there's an acorn placed right there. And you can place as many acorns as you want. And they actually have a processor. So they are technically a processor. So I've renamed some of the code files I've renamed them from processors or from containers to processors, because some things are not going to be containers that are processors. So for example, this acorn, it's not a container. You can right click it, and I have to change that, but there's no inventory for it. So it's not a container, but it is a processor because it processes how long it's been placed in the world to define how long it takes to grow. So that's another thing about the game. So I've coded the acorns to work like this. They take 240 seconds, which is 4 minutes. It takes 4 minutes for them to grow, and then each acorn has a random amount of time beyond 4 minutes that it'll take to grow. So it'll take 4 minutes plus anywhere from 0 seconds to 127 seconds more, which basically means it can take anywhere from 4 to 6-ish minutes for the acorns to grow. And I've coded it to be that way. So that's the acorns. Honestly, that's all I've added to the game. But it is a lot, because now we have a whole framework in the game for pigs spawning and pigs existing in the game. And so the reason I added a pig to the game is because I looked around at, I wanted to add a new energy generation source. That's the main thing I'm trying to focus on. In order to do that, you need, I was thinking about doing solar panels. So based on the time of day, right now we're nighttime because it's kind of darkened. But based on the time of day, I was thinking that we're going to have solar panels in the game, and it generates power based on the time of day. And you need phosphorus to make solar panels. And phosphorus can be extracted from meat. And when animals eat plants and stuff, they can actually get phosphorus from the meat. So yeah, that's all there is really that's in this update. So just a few things about the pig. So it drops meat when killed. That's one thing I wrote down. They also they spawn in the meadows. They only spawn in the meadows. There's no other place. They won't spawn in a forest. They won't spawn on the rockland. They won't spawn in a beach over here. They won't spawn in the water. They won't spawn anywhere other than in the meadow biome, which is why this house is built in a meadows biome. So that's why we found a pig just wandering around. The pig also, it will not spawn during nighttime. It'll only spawn in the day. So right now the game's in nighttime, so we're not going to see any pig spawning until it becomes daytime. So that's what's in this update. So I'm going to show some of the code. So if you're interested in seeing what the code looks like, you can stay, but that's the update. That's the devlog for this one. So I'm going to show a bit of how the code works around this update now. If you're interested in that, you can stay. If you're not, you can go. So for I'm going to talk about identifying files, or identifying tiles and items. So that thing that I talked about where, for example, here's a boulder. And so this is an enum, which is basically, it's an enumeration. It basically has a bunch of different, you can think of these as variables. So, you know, the surface tile ID has a variable called blank, a variable called boulder, a variable called pebble, all this stuff. And it tells you, it basically tells you what, it gives you information about that tile. So these are all the tiles. And so the first thing here, it tells you what items get dropped when you break that thing. So 1 is the item ID for stone, and then this is how many of that item ID you get. So you get 3 stones from breaking a boulder. You get 1 stone from taking a pebble. You get 3 wood, because 2 is wood, and you get 2 acorns. 3 is acorn. And so that's all the different things. That's all that's there. So then water, for example, it has null. So it means it doesn't give you anything when you break it. And so then the code, when you try to break water, it'll say, okay, is this null? If it is, then don't break the water, don't give you anything. And then over here, there's unbreakable, there's pickaxe, there's axe, there is none. So these are the different tools you would have to use to break that thing. So for a boulder, you have to use a pickaxe. On a tree, you have to use an axe. If there's nothing there, then you just assume it's none. For certain things, like the blast furnace, you have to tell it none. You can't, because I've coded it in a way where if it's a container, you have to tell it that it has none. And so maybe I'll change this to pickaxe later, and it'll use pickaxe durability. But for now, that's that. And then there's the acorn here. When you harvest the acorn, it gives you 1 acorn. So if you planted an acorn in the world, it'll give you back an acorn when you try to harvest it if you decide I don't want this acorn to grow here. And so then that's for harvesting tiles, so this is what tells you, it basically controls how, what items you get. So there's certain things like tile value 13 removes the mine tile. And so what that does is right here, it goes into the files and removes the mining tile in the mine chunks, which is basically in the cove dimension. It goes and removes the mine that is associated with that mine in the surface dimension. And then it says if the tile's tool, so it has this variable here, where is it? Tile, that gets whatever tile value we're looking at. And it says, okay, do you need a pickaxe? Then are you holding a pickaxe? Okay, use that item. And then same thing for axe. Are you holding an axe? If you are, use that item. If not, you return and you don't harvest the item. And then over here, it does a harvest for either basic harvest, which is just any item that's not a container. Basic container harvest does the same thing, but it removes the file. So there you go. And then if you're in dimension 1, which is the mining dimension, I didn't change anything because this is code that I've already put in and it works. So I might change this to make it more efficient. But this is the code that I'm going to probably leave there and not ever change for harvesting tiles. And then this is basically the same exact idea for placing tiles. So an acorn, the tile ID for the acorn is 22. The wooden wall, the tile ID for that is 4. So if there's numbers here, it basically the short and then 4. These are all basically telling you what item it places. And if there's no item there, then it means you don't place it. So the ore item, you can't place the ore item. A processed aluminum bar, we can't place that, so there's nothing there. And if there's nothing there, it just gets set to null. And then place tile does the exact same thing, basically. So if inventory value equals 9, so there are certain tiles that still have to have extra things done when they're placed. So for example, placing the door, there's 2 different orientations for placing the door, right? So there's this orientation where it's up and down, and then there's this orientation for up here where it's side to side. So it's basically horizontal door or a vertical door. So that still has to be checked for when you place a tile. But otherwise, there's a bunch of weird code that I don't fully understand, but I found it and it works. So yeah, different code for placing tiles. There are tiles, and then there's electronics and processors. It checks to see if there's a processor to each item. This value means for the electric furnace, it checks 21. So it goes in and actually checks, it gets a processor and says, well, this one says no container, but it basically gets a processor and it's like, okay, is that processor, is this actually a processor? And if it is, then it makes the files for that processor when you place it. So that's completely overhauled and changed. And now, literally, all I have to do now if I want to add a new tile is just go in here and say you're adding a small rock or something like that. You can put a small rock, you can tell it new short, you can tell it what you add, you can tell it its name, stuff like that. So yeah, basically all I have to do is add a line of code that's similar to these above lines of code here. You have to add 1 line of code for every new tile you make, and similar for any new items you make. For item IDs, any new items you make, you just add it to the bottom of this list. So literally, when I added the pig, meat straight up is just sitting there. That's meat. And there's nothing special about it, so I didn't even have to give it any values. So yeah, for like coal, for example, literally it doesn't have any special things about coal. It is used to smelt, and I might change that. But like wood, stone, those things, they don't have any special things about them. But copper wire, for example, its name when you place it is copper space wire, because you can have a space here. The code will yell at you. So if you want to tell it its name is actually with a space here, then you have to put it in here. And then this tells you what tile ID corresponds to the wire that's an inventory item. So yeah, I'm not going to save that because I don't know what I've changed. And then there's the pigs. So there's a creature. There's interesting things that I learned when I was streaming this. There's a guy who was helping me a lot. So there's a bunch of different things about the creature. So there's a type, entity types. So entity types, there's player, there's passive, there's enemy, there's projectiles and tiles and item drops in the world. So the pig is a passive. So when you add the pig to the game, it tells you the type, and the type, it's going to be passive. So whenever you added this type would just be entity types dot passive for every time you add a pig. And then you give it its XY chunk locations, its velocity, its positions. So these are positions where it renders on the screen. So this is where it stores that it thinks the pig is, and this is where it renders it on the screen. And then here's a sprite sheet resolution, which is defined in here. Sprite sheet resolution gets set right there. There's all these different things. And then drops. So when a creature dies, there's this drops. And the drops, you can set it to whatever you want. So here's drops. And it just tells you it's meat. And you get 2. So whenever you kill an enemy, it'll check the drops. If the player killed it, it'll check the drops. If it dies some other way, it won't. But if the player kills it, it checks the drops and then does that. So then there's knockback velocity. So this is the X and Y velocity for knockback. So when you hit the pig, it'll increase these, and then knockback velocity gets set back to 0 pretty quickly. And then there's renders, and this is how you get the render position. So this is where it actually renders the pig onto the screen. And then this is the cool thing that I learned, is you can have a second class inside the class. So this is a creature. It has a wandering behavior. So when you see the pig just kind of randomly wandering around, it's using this wandering behavior. So the pig has a wandering behavior, a new wandering behavior. And then down here in render, it does random wander, which then goes in here and runs this random wander method, which basically generates random directions for the pig to walk in. And then the pig also has these rendering things, which is basically it'll start facing left or right, and that just basically inverts the direction of the pig, and then you have to like find the 4 rotation points for each of the limbs of the pig based on if it's facing left or right, and then draw images for the body, and draw images for the limbs. So each limb is stored as a buffered image in creature. And obviously pig extends creature. So that's how the pig works. And you can just kind of look through this code if you're interested. There's an aspect ratio, which basically makes it easier for us to put this pig on the screen, because you basically define its width, and then its height gets defined based on what the aspect ratio is of the pig. There you go. So that's all you really have to know about the pig. Then there's a spawn event every 10 seconds, so 10 times how many ticks per second. Every 10 seconds, it tries to spawn, and it spawns per spawn event 2. So it tries to spawn 2 pigs, or 2 animals, honestly, every time. So it just does a for loop, and I can change that to 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how many enemies and stuff I put in the game. Yeah, so then basically if its transparency equals 0, so that's basically the daytime cycle if we're completely daytime, or if the light level is greater than 5 at that tile, then you can try to spawn a pig there. And then creatures dot size is greater than, if it's less than or equal to 3. So basically 3 is the maximum number of creatures that can be in the game right now, and I'll totally change that. But then, yeah, basically does all this other crazy stuff to spawn the pig and adds it to the creature list. That's basically all that I've added in this update. So, yeah, I think I've covered everything. So the other thing that I did not mention in Devlog 3, I did change this in Devlog 3, but it's that if you go to a container, so this container, if you break a container, it gives you everything in that container. Now, I have every intention to make it actually drop the items in the world, but you could see in the corner there, it told me exactly what was in the container. So if I have 50 stone, and it can be randomly around in the container in random different spots, but it told me I got all this different stone that was in the inventory and the cabinet. So yeah, so now if you accidentally break a container, you don't just lose all the items that were in the container, which it was actually what happened before. You would just lose all the items. And I had every intention to change that, and I did change it. So there you go. That's Devlog 4 for Project Adapt. I hope you guys have enjoyed. There's not going to be a devlog for a while now, because I'm not going to really be here for the summer. So I just wanted to make this last devlog to update what's been going on in the game. So thank you all for watching. This has been Joystick Justin. Project Adapt. It's coming along. As always, don't forget to keep on gaming. Peace.